Everybody sanga ho emaho tashi dele gedin batani jakaso so maso so ni jogotani tada kachiri chuni tamje tani tashi dele chavi.
Tashi dele to all the sangha in your various countries who are not joining us for the teachings.
Terida kadang teri tadi kasih dengan kejar jauh lucu jauh le teri sosok pun cungdiri teri jila wang kuci cek teri rumah de lojang cek rumah nyami cek wang kerja rumah tu boleh teri tata ngacin ceri orang cakap sungguh tata rumah mesti cimi cakap teri tak perlu tunggu teri cek teri tunggu teri rumah nyami teri gua soleh. Teri kapteri tada katang jino cho pokchung tu toba te ta rungan rewa yo unta ro te sare teri ni teri ta soso yang teri ma chedera te chidok ma bo chong yo re teri kangi chebo ma jong hongi teri ta lakpa de jetri no me so ata na kare chang kangi chang ma cher se la so de ko ma Generally, Dongade Jungle Groma in song. Dongate the Gangi, the other Cochot in Goyore, Teveletally, Takani Mambo Tree, Roma Tree, Roma job, they go so sorry, Muslim Chema, job songs on each. You're 10 quality, Chodon Parial, the Tambino, the Kashina showing.
And so yesterday, also was telling you a few stories, and also before about Tara, and also how when I was very young, how I had to confer in empowerment, and so I for this reason, I studied, I learned about Tara and how to confer the empowerment. And also there was this sadhana that was composed by the previous Garchen Rinpoche, Garchen Rinpoche, who composed the sadhana that we are always practicing here, the wheel of immortality. And also, I told a story yesterday about Tara in relation to this text, the wish-fulfilling jewel, which also is connected to Tara, and more like a real manifestation of her signs. So in this life, I have encountered a lot of happiness and suffering. And when I was young, before I really encountered big difficulties, I didn't really have a great habit of supplicating to Tara, because we generally think that if we don't really have so much difficulty, then there is no need to pray or to supplicate. So therefore, it is also said that suffering is really an encourager, someone who encourages you to cultivate renunciation. It is when you encounter suffering and difficulties that you remember the deity and the three jewels. And so then I encountered a lot of hardships, and that is when I remembered Tara, and that is when she protected me. And I have full trust in the fact that she really protected me. So today, Dharma friends, I'm going to share a few stories about that.
Magdong Tadok Majin, Kosonin Kayosai, Mark Tadok J. The Mark Tadok J. Tambo Mark Tadok J. Sayomari, the Tomatab Mangarum, the Jaran Bojer said, Jokatong, 就是基本动，这点是家中间的，这里第二点呢，这点多少往继续，多少往继续的底下呢，这里到他看的，他拿进来，他让从他家里呢，这里已经那个不说说切的，他压根的，这把不着中的，这里马东咋都这样的，我是好搞嘛的，第二点呢，这里他马正郎的这里他马正郎的这里他啥卡的。마정하고 가면서 그 마진저 다독대 하고 요래 강해지는 대자가 당시 먹고 송 촉체지 체대에 맞고 요래 대제는 마속랑에 되는 마속랑 간에 소소라니 나들이 고발라마 섬요를 조금 남았선 대제는 조금 치아졌다 잡진 남들 뭐지 또 고마지 될 섬지면 잡에 들이라마 짜침보래 나지 자워서 탑체들이 다 이치 요발라마 별은 남들은 뭐지 거방나 공히나 되니 무슨 파돌로 말에 대대로 송 나치 자옥대로 송용 말에 대대로마 짜침보 콩고탕을 로비자래죠 티체들이 먼저 당아 니거든이 고라자 슬로마 마지나 이 고파도 양 조라송 초토고요 말에 이 꼴고래들이 콩로지를 창선에 이가 로스는 대주거든 참 대주고 갑대 이가 로니사 대 이가 딩으로 대야 이dem 저 미발라 토들이 들이 소발랑송들이 들로 니 로직도 세가 나온 말이 해탑요 말이 들이 생속랑니 들이 제가 받는 지자오 그들이 서로 마도 마다라 마도 송을 들고서 나는 어석잡대요 그래.
So the first difficulty that I encountered was the turmoil, the war started in 1957, 8. So that's when things got really difficult. And so in the beginning, we didn't really understand the reason for this war and what was happening. But then there were the various benefactors from various areas in Tibet and also from eastern Tibet who so eventually got together and collaborated to form an army to protect His Holiness the Dalai Lama's escape. And so in order to, at that time there was no Tibetan army or no resistance army that was set up. So in order to set that up, they arranged a great Kalachakra empowerment that His Holiness the Dalai Lama was supposed to give. And in that context, they wanted to offer him a golden throne according to custom. And so then they used that as a pretext to pull together their resources to form this resistance army. And so then the people who gathered together at that occasion, they had to take like an oath, like a vow, to no matter what lineage they belonged to, they took this oath to protect the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so for that purpose, the army was set up. So at that time, when all that happened, I didn't yet know about it. But it already started all over in the Lhasa area. The only thing I really knew was that there was this plan to protect the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so during that time when everything just started, at my own monastery, we had three main durgus, main lamas, so the greater lamas. And for example, there was the previous incarnation of Namdra Rinpoche and Lamchen Gyalpo and so on. So really trustworthy lamas, like it was said that the previous Namdra Rinpoche, that when he would give like a kind of a crown initiation, then there would be no bardo for that person. So he was a very precious guru. And so at that time, he was doing a 4-year retreat. And while he was in retreat, it was Mingyu Rinpoche and myself who were going around through the villages to also collect donations and so on. Otherwise, we couldn't hold our monastery ceremonies. And so then after 4 years, when he came out of retreat, then I had the opportunity to do a 3-year retreat. And so I started the 3-year retreat, and I completed the preliminaries. And in the fivefold path of Mahamudra, I had just reached Chakra Samvara practice. So I was not even 2 years into my retreat, maybe a year and a half, that the war broke out. And so at that time, the Nangchen king gave the order for no one to leave their monasteries, the lamas not to leave their monasteries. So at that time, therefore, I still insisted on staying at the monastery.
Rati takatama ma korte di mamak de ya teki teli gola teli chakashi yong ma da na jada yomari teli te gong no mo te ta sani teli me ya rawdi yoke te regote na me satna ta ma ya de jogo yore toka jashi teli te ro teli gong mo te teli so ke jimda karchiwa jewa ta yoga teli na chini ta 또 정부 재신이데 살아가니데 요래 이때 살아 노작들이 줄라 살아 던지들이 뛰고 뭐 나살 영내들이 맞게 강고 이 라만가타가 되는 것도 매 체령만 내매봐 제 보람 잡게 요래 숨독만 잡게 요래 아니 뭐 산이 이게 마트다 고 보람 가래자 이처럼 뭐 자고 보람 자나 고 산이 공신이 땅을 마셔라 then Gasser job is cooking to like a muscle war taps on the trico, Gasser, Machola, that's honey sugar, Dimona Jarity, Nam County, they call it, so Nam they call the this and Namaka, was a summer, that go back out of the summer go roll, the poem, Tamte, didn't go through the road, none in Nambuka tap. There is Sally Mangamentaja. 대리명망 탑재 가시겠들이 작업과 작업 요래 들이 디모들이 막 사비잖아 디도로래 들이 바타다디 디 로지세 디 태왕 지속 강에 잡는 데 로지지 로마지 지지 거리도 약보들이 무슨 로마 고조소 봐 잡는 거 무슨세는 어때 공격하다 깔려 잡는데 바드들이 로마 남는 거 좋시야 들이 다티 이런 것들은
And so at that time we were still at the monastery, and so then finally we reached a point where people felt that at this point it makes no more difference whether we fight, whether we resist, or we just surrender. So since everyone said that anyways all lamas were being killed and many tankas and scriptures and so on was burned and destroyed, so everyone said whatever we do now is it makes really no difference. So since it made no difference, I then decided to leave the monastery and enter the army and fight the war. And that I did for 2 years, from 58 to 59 and then until 60. And at that time, really, everyone was really fighting. All the men were certainly fighting, all the females, the women, all had guns, everybody really was fighting. And so that went on until 1960 when I was then put into prison. But so at that time when I first entered the army, so that was when His Holiness the Dalai Lama had already been able to escape to India. So it all happened during this time that the country was invaded, and then Holiness managed to escape to India. And so at that time, after His Holiness had arrived in India, there were basically four main armies of the there were four great provinces, which was like the Tibetan province, Xizang, and then there was Qinghai, and then was Lado, and there was Sichuan. So basically all the armies, the greater armies were destroyed, and all that was really left of our army, of the entire army, the resistance army, were some isolated units, and so we were sent into some southern county, and there was a big mountain where we ended up, and that mountain had so on its lower part until the middle part it was a forest, and then up on toward the peak of the mountain it was just rocks and just barren. There was no forest, so it looked really forbidding. And there was also a large river going through there, the Ngulchu. And so at that time, so we ended up in that mountain, and the Chinese army surrounded the entire mountain. And then slowly they would come closer, so we would retreat further up the mountain. And so we are basically fighting our way further and further up the mountain, until we came to the barren part of the mountain where there were just rocks. And so when we just reached this kind of almost barren land, it was late at night, and so that is when things got really difficult, because they were about to get us. And so there was, it was in the middle of the night, and there was this very important benefactor I had from Nangchen. His name was Sara Dunchu. He was a trader, a merchant. And so he came to me that night, and he said that now my entire life I prayed to the Gar gurus for long life and for good health, free from illness. Today, I will make a different prayer to you, and that is tomorrow when the communists come to get us, I pray to the three jewels that I will not fall into their hands alive. So if I will die tomorrow not falling into their hands, then the three jewels have protected me. But if the communists catch me alive and I do not die in their hands, then the jewels have not protected me. And so that was his prayer. And in fact, the next day when the communists came, he did die. And so at that time, the scenery basically was one of weapons flying around everywhere. So even a male and female all were armored. and there were planes flying, dropping bombs, and bullets were flying through the air, and some people were even fighting with knives. And so eventually we lost the war and we surrendered our army. And so basically there's more to this story, and it was actually all written down. It was all and made a film out of it, and so it was put together by the Taiwan Center. They really worked very hard for that, because so this story that you find on from the Taiwan Center is something that is really made really excellently, so you can trust in that story. And then also there is those images here to illustrate this entire journey, and these images were created by another disciple, Gonjo Soba. Also, he worked really hard on those images. And so anyways, now we are at the point where we surrendered our army.
이들은 다이 잡아봐봐는 이제 내 파도지 다이 쇼크들이 다 매다 잡송선이 초와대들이 얘는 파도 철카골을 다 쇼크를 쇼크대다 이제다 남니 말다 그래 살이다 잡아봐봐는 잡송데 이 뒤는 샤바송 아깝들 때는 총이 좀 왔죠 삼이 내 당남이 이들이 막하시라라 뭐 니는 가 고바자 보고 니가 뭐 잡아 거기서 갈래 드린 진이 쳐서 속다대도 로요에 때마다 그러니까 딱벌 남죽게 요게 요래 이제 대다와 드린 막하시 리사요래 드린 돌아티는 뭐 팀을 다 총고를 마셔들이 타래들이 지파 드린 약합이 양마 많고도 거래지.
So at that time and in the war, really there was a rainfall of bullets flying, and the force of these bullets was so strong that even though they didn't actually hit me, it almost felt like I thought I was hit by it. But what I really felt was the blast from the bullet just passing by. The force was so strong. And so basically bullets came from all directions, up and down, like rain falling down, but I didn't die at that time. And I really felt that at that time I was protected from the fear of weapons. And so during that time also, during the daytime, because the Chinese army was raiding for survivors and so on for us, so we had to hide during the daytime, and we had to hide by covering our bodies with grass. And so we stayed there the entire day for several days. And at nighttime, I went out to try to find some water. At the daytime, there was no way we could move at all because there were planes flying over all day long looking for people. So all day we would lie there covered by the grass. And I did not die in the face of weapons, so I was freed from that. But then in the end, the army capitulated.
들이 다투죠 참으로 참아 정을 이스라엘에 막 그래서 라산 꼬라 잡네. 이 마크네들이 설명 때들이 다투죠 탐빌로들이 다 참아 가지미 봐. 낭중강마저 세 들이 신신이 어도거들이 망탑들 가람이 받들이 배나 답이 강이 집어종으로 대탐진 공사들이 뒷감이들이 다 중강나 들이 가라데서 요나양들이 되게 핀소음에 목에 깔반다고 송 들이 데르들이 나 들이 되는 민강나나 민강나 chen 들이 민강나는 전에들이 민강나니 양고 거지 들이 뭐 거지는데 양절적 동사대로 제게 저단디 로지담지들이 그리스티나 로유 때문에 지나는 다 참아요래 파체요래 다른 데를 아들이 그런 거 쫓아고 시에 좀지 똑같이 저라 생각 나요래 나는 들이 민강나나 들이자요래.
So then in 1960, I was brought to Xining, going around Lhasa, and I was put into prison. And so Actually, on the outside, it was not obvious, but it was really a labor camp prison on the inside. And so this was a time where everyone, also outside, everyone experienced a lot of suffering due to famine. There was no food anywhere. And there was just a little bit of food in prison, but it was not enough. So we really encountered an age of famine, of starvation. And so that was a time where I fell very ill, and I was then brought to the prison's hospital. And so then there is this story about how I had invited over an official, a high government official, and when he came close, I punched him. So there's this story, actually, it's also in the movie that Christina made. Probably most parts of that story are in that movie. So therefore today I'm just giving you kind of an introduction, a brief outline to those stories. But this was also a time where Tara had protected me again from fear when I was ill and in the hospital in prison.
민간은 성리들이 다쪽대가 다 같이 오래 했지. 내가 시버탈로들이 갈고 오는데 나머지 같이 보래 때는 고름 탑재 동 고치 탑재 파 고철시 들이 다들이 막 시고 오래 때라고 올라네. 이 고치 적자면더니 다주 로축 정리 제랑 때는 파마 요살이 들이랑 약하고 소총 제리 장 거의 키우는데 고치들은 인형제 요래 고소 땅 고치들 가시래 들이 탑재 장 사발로로 제리 대신 들이다 칼라 사는 칼니 칼라 마사와 말이 니는 미사마 칼라 때기 오면 주속에 민망시 뭐 이렇게 싫어요 이제 딱 이런 미시 창을 저랑 칼라 가리서를 떼지 거기 개랑을 칼라 때는 게 싸게 돼 대다들이 되게 그저 칼라 때 마음이 강한 같이 벌어들이 다른 사마 네바 르바 저도 칼라 요래 들이 네바 싫어 칼라들이 뒤쪽 네 때문에 뒤에 네바 파지를 뒤섬 된다더니 칼라를 바르바마 뭐 샤로가 들이 칼라 고주 때그 요래 나대도 오래 나창 사마되고 들이 창딱 칼라 사로지 이제 들이 그렇게 능탁바디 고치지 딱 공치 땅을 공을 가시는 들이 잡아서 뭐 요래 들이 삼히지 그 시에기 요래 이게 칼라 사게 들이 칼라 뒤섬 뒤에 뒤쪽 참았을 때는 나중에 앞에 서고 아시네 이 서고 야고 차서 이 라마지다 이 세타고 시라는 다 도투치 라마 쪽에 되는 요래 거기에 약칼라 사람도 돼 이 데라들 칼라 사서 잡을 납고 되게 시라 이래 요래 시라 이어 들으셔 아지래 이 제시를 들으시는가 서고 야고 차들이 작은 사강남을 같이 말을 자서
And so at that time, I felt that I was in hospital, and I really just wanted to die. And so I was thinking about what can I do for this to happen, to die. So I was thinking that already I'm here for a great offense, and now I even punched a really high official. So that should do so they can kill me. So and I told that official, I just want to die. And this official really had some affection for me, and he really insisted, and he said that you're very young, you probably have parents, you work really really well, and so I really believe in you, and just relax a bit and eat some food. So he really had some compassion for me. And so at that time, really, no one really had anything to eat in prison. And most people were actually dying of starvation. So he told me to eat. And so I said that, so it's not that I don't eat, but you're not giving us anything to eat. If you want me to eat, then you have to really feed me well. And so then they put me into this room alone, into this hospital room all alone. And so in this prison hospital, there are different levels of food distribution. So depending on how sick you are, if you are close to dying, then they would feed you 6 times a day. And then the next level would be 4 times a day. And most sick people would get fed 3 times a day. And so they actually gave me all those levels. So they gave me the 6 times, the 4 times, and the 3 times. So I ate, and I listened to that government official, because he really, and there were a few of them, and he really also was one of them who really had some compassion and who really also liked me. And so I ate, and 1 month later, my body, my health was restored and was even better than before. And so after that, there was this other lama, and the officials told me about Cultivating Durgu, and so they said that he is also not eating, and so they asked me, please tell him to eat, and so I asked him to, I requested him to eat, and so at that time, then everything went a bit better. My health improved, and I was appointed to work as a cook in the kitchen.
내가 속이 저발 좁도 당한 네 뭐이 저발 좁성 들이 저거 약고 자서 강나들 가라살 그런 요리 들이 자강는 이들이 다티쇼 뼈사바 요리 진리 라미티데 요리 토름티 디나니 들이 가서 강나는 디사 강나는 요리 디사 강나는 오늘들이 철인 거 그래 이 쳐들이 저들이 젓가락 요리데 납치 장고 잘 젓가락에 큰들이 꼬부 큰 송들이 천주가로 철인이 줘 그래. 내가 철인을 줘 요래. 이 철인이 식다지 이거 그래. 이 식다가를 되니까 조동치 뭐 요원들이 뭐 이렇게 들이 철이 이거 요래. 이 값들이 약간 쫓아봐 요래. 들이 때리 철이면 파철 자만에 시다리를 뭐 이래 매망보 요래 빼 요래. 이는 철들이는 천주 체벌이 천주 끼리 쳐대배 쌍마야고 요래. 는 당산이 쳐대에서 용마요래. 방을 남아도 시실인 거 다가 첫장만이 천주 끼를 놓는데 다 공지 요래. 이다가 좋다나 마로 들은 인가도 이 다를 말 차는 인가 요리라고도 택적성 중만 이성이 니마지와서 되나 다차 들이 쳐나가 마서 로서 천주 끼는 미망고 샤송이구나. 시성들이 주도배 쳐버려. 이 시성들이 홍성들이 매지마 주도가 타를 보여. 정리 때들 나좀 멋지다 요 말이야. 그 나랑들이 라르디 초콜릿 주바티 라르시 들이 고민이 납속돼. 얘네들이 돌로 참아 쳐그냐. 저들이 배 양무들이 양무들 자동카라 깡박 야쇼성 들이 다 공간이 다깝지 상마서 당연히 저기 바로 좁성사 들이 하래서 별들이 며칠짜리만 라미에서 고향 못 차서 이제 저기 바로 좁성지
And so I was protected from weapons, and I was protected from the threat of starvation. And so then the next time I was protected from the threat of drowning. And so I was appointed to work in this kitchen, and there were 10 kitchens, and so each kitchen was like one team. And in my kitchen, where I was working, it was like the Lama team. And so I was working in that kitchen together with the other Lamas. And so then we always needed to fetch water for the kitchen. And normally we would have running water, but sometimes when the weather would get very cold, the pipes would freeze and we couldn't, the water couldn't flow. So then we had to go to fetch water from the reservoir lake there. And that was a huge lake. And so for each team, they had like 2 people going with on those carts And on the back of those carts, they had tanks to transfer the water into. And so at this time, I went to fetch water. And so they were different. So that basically it was winter time, and the lake, the reservoir was completely frozen. And there were just a few holes in the lake, in the ice, for people to fetch the water. And so one was right close to the shore, where most people fetch the water, but the water was not so clear. It was a little cloudy. And because I was working on the llama team and I felt like I'm serving the llamas, I really wanted to get the best clean water for them. So then there was this other hole in the lake, which was right in the center, and the water there was crystal clear, was very clean. But then people didn't want to go there because it's dangerous, so they told me, don't go there. People have died, broken through the ice. It's very dangerous. But I really wanted to serve the llamas clean water, so I insisted on going. And so I went over the ice to the hole in the center. The first time, there was no problem, brought the water back. Then I went the second time. And then the second time, my legs broke through the ice and I fell into the water. And and so actually the lake was so huge that everybody else was really far away, so there was nobody with me that could help me. And so I was completely submerged in water. And so somehow, so as I was already sinking in water and completely drained, like soaking in water, I had this carrying pole for the buckets. And so the pole was kind of lying on the ice still, not in the water. So somehow, miraculously, my body kind of it came to float instead of sinking, and then I could hold on to that carrying pole and lift myself up with ease, and I was just lying there on that sheet of ice then. And that was really actually quite incredible. I was quite amazed by how effortlessly I was able to emerge from the water. So that was the time where I was protected from the danger of drowning.
Tiri lo joini lo ne tiri tesa zhongchang yamu saling zhongchele zali man do shukwa tiri yo zhugong tiri yo re ta tiri lacha chungchung yang saya yo re tiri tesa yamu re tala le tiri tala le tiri yang nga di soro la kangwa chungchung le ngala kusa ichi yo re ten kangwa chungchung le tina tiri jala song tiri lakcha tabji yo re tiri nang snofa tabji yang ka le ka le yong la tiri jala tabji kangwa 동구절에 동침번을 잘라 파야 이 고승nga ya nga tiri nga kangwa chungchung 좀 kangwa lumbar이 망샤와 lumbar이 나는 아주 딱딱 나는들이 도서를 도치고 이 아야 메잡 된 kangwa랑 뭐 감고서 도서를 도고 하고 나서 그렇지 매 당신이 남 공이지 드리베 서바치 보다를 누구 구조다니 매 차도 드리 좀서 왔다 택할수 다 동이 살이지 다 남는들이 라그 다비나들이 추천들을 맡아주셔서 잡지 쳐 초점을 통들이라 고바자야면도 옛날들이 라그 당연히 소들이 나나 추조도 사동 때에 들이 좋게 고도 내가 왔다들 랩들이 고치지요 말이 들이 고소가 좁고지야 바탕이 고소 뭐다 깨잡다들 고소라고 거기야용네 들가 고스tab지 뭐지 다 죽셔서 삼성세 딱 고소 다 시요 말이 들 고소가 오지 이래야지 도서부터 오 도테로 메타나 요말 때도 메 야자자 셔도리 들 고소 하래서 들이 도서부터 그들이 양쪽 손데
Then, after you had been in prison for 12 years, there was a chance to be transported to a lighter a prison facility. So at that time, they transported me to this different lighter prison in close to Xining. And so this was like a place where, like a kind of a place where people were working with tools, and I was stationed there to become the guard of those tools, so that nobody would steal them. And they really trusted me, so they even built a little house for me there. And so then they put all the tools and the larger objects and so forth to be protected there, and I was supposed to protect them. And so then that house still had was still a little bit wet from the plaster. And so then, in order to dry that, I thought of burning coals, making a big fire with coals. And I didn't know that coals are toxic at that time. So I closed all the openings and made a fire with the coals and went to bed. And in the middle of the night, I started to feel quite happy, but I couldn't move. So I just supplicated to Tara, and so I felt that there must be some poison. And so I had this little tincture in a bottle that was blessed by many lamas, like a blessing water, a blessing tincture. And I actually couldn't walk, but I was able to kind of get to the ground and then get to that bottle and drink a little bit of that. And then I just lay there until the morning. In the morning, the other workers arrived, but I couldn't open the door. I still couldn't move. And they couldn't open the door was locked. And so those companions actually there were some friends among them who really loved me very much. And so they were crying and they were yelling, shouting for me. And I didn't open. So they then forced their way into the building. And so they broke the windows were open. So then they were so surprised, and they said, "You didn't die?" And I clearly did not die. And they were so happy, but they said that actually, if you burn coals, that's highly toxic fumes. You can't do that. Anyone who does that certainly will die. So they were really quite amazed that I didn't die. So that is when I was protected from the fear of carbon monoxide.
Dili chapta long ne ta malong ko logic song kana dili ta rang amato ko song dili ta lo ni song kap chare go chane dili daung solo dang yo ma le dili go chi tam jing al pe te ya go yo le dili lakchar zama june dili rang ma di tang sam pe ma go le yo le dili tera to ka song dili song le dili mal to ya go cha so dili yang dili Tograna dili yang gangi chibo chesong, dili yang dili magla minri de ya kondo dili tok de yang shima song, tok teng tambo dili ra song ji.
So then, shortly before I was released from prison, about a year or less before, and I already had spent 20 years in prison at that time, but I was still not released at that point. So that is when they allowed me to go visit my mother. And so in order to be able to do that, the prison officials, who really loved me very much, they issued this fake document for me to go and see my mother. And so at that time I was able to see my mother, so I met her. However, at that place, and where I met my mother, I encountered the fear of poison. So I was poisoned there. But then at that place where my mother stayed, I also received really good medicine, so I didn't die. So this was the first time I encountered the threat of poison.
조고 상어 땅 차서들이 나지가 집어들 라도 마도 요 말이 그가 뭐 라된 애들이 다다 나더니 다시 도촉조를 애들이 파일러 땅 애들이 세자를 내서 세자를 내미들이 세자리 레 마송 들이들이 양고보다는 마소 로직 고만을 사요래 고만을 사래들이 로직들이 다다단지 로직 좀 중심지 때문에 시지 아리송들이 그만 강바 정성만 좋고 요래 드니디 로마 땡상가자 미사가자들이 되면서 라마할마 쇼는들이 거서 나요마 가벨 거서 이 라가 치아는 시지 초고바 차요래 그 나한테 보려요래 그 못하는 것이 이제들이 다 수첩발에 다 주님은 초고 얘는 엄마들이 가공리 사토 칸 이거 마탑들이 마설인데 돼요래 그 다음에 시제 토카 아메리카야 마탑네 다가 시제의 최송들이 다다다 그마다는 로지라나 최소는 시제 초고들이 다다다 주시제 초가 군도나 다 주님변하니들이 니가 최슈리 라강요리들이 남착슈리 셔도리들이 시간 안 도인데 이 못하는 어석잡성을 못하는 어석잡들이 못하는 약슈리 주장 거 못하네 들이지 다신 거는 들이 무슨 거 지요래 되나니 이 못하들이 잘하는 데들이 못한 거 여기 못 따사배가 차성 이 모든 공감나요 못한 남을 때네 너희들이 시제에 같이 적항을 이제 들이 문제지 신제된 가고는 거 쏟아 대저 동볼로 소리 레비소들이 같이 타버리지 탱 당보들이 시지 샤탕데 들이 낭만 가서 샤탕님 바디 저공만은 조리오래 로텔들이 시제 처음부터 시지 똑같이 애들이 네 대저 동볼로 다시 타버리지 들이 신지 똑같은 것들이 가고는 파티지가 저 소리 시 타카데들이 같이 사초한 것들이 루틴이 망하모들이 로직들이 갑제도 치나 샤세를 말이 로리 테미 말이 샴초고 말이 베티서 짜친 말이 베타다 로바타들 제요리 대외들이 같이 이제 도와서 들어가는 못한지 못한들이 마세들이 다 무슨 민가요리 들이 자만 누가 정말도 돼 나라 아니라잖아 마스다 셔고 마다 네 마송을 들이 아송을 들이 라과스랑 배 많이 잡들이 아리디 아메리카가 들이 엠버 들이 설명을 요래 엠버 컨트롤을 들이 아미주제 그 컨트롤냐도 시제 소 들이 라과스랑 가르치 시제 소 들이 아들이 심마서 들이 다 못하다들이 못하실 때는 니가 무슨 못 찍자 요 말이 좀 못하서 잡지게 고강들 랩체들이 대다왜 대다 양 못하는 집안에 좁성 다들 좁성 사는 게 대다왜 양양들이 시제에서 온지.
So then later I arrived in the West in America, and so so after I was released from prison, most of my companions were already released. So before I arrived to America, I had not yet arrived out of prison, and so then I finally was able to go, and they sent me home to my homeland. And then I came to the West, and then after some time of having arrived in the West, I again went back to Tibet, to the monastery, and then I was left there for about a year. And so every year we would hold the Yamantaka Drupchen, and also that had already started in Arizona. In Arizona, we held the first Yamantaka Drupchen up in the Lama house. And then later on, gradually, the many disciples crowded really and lined up to also join the Yamantaka Drupchen. So then people couldn't fit any longer in the Lama house. So then we started the Drupchen here at the temple, in the bigger temple. And when we did that in Arizona for the first time, I was not there, but Gabe Lama was there and so on. And they held the Drupchen here in the temple. So at that time, I was in Tibet. And the Drupchen in Tibet, in Garchen, and the Drupchen here in Arizona is held every year at the same time, which is the 12 Tibetan months. And so at that time, I was in, I really wanted to, since I couldn't go back to Arizona, I really wanted to at least join the Yamantaka Drupchen at Gar Monastery. And so at that time, I was not right there, I was in Xining, and I really wanted to go. And I felt that I cannot skip a year of Yamantaka. Even if it means that I die, I have to go. So actually at that time, it was quite dangerous to go from Xining to Gar Monastery. It's a very difficult journey. The 12th month in the Tibetan year is really the most dangerous month to travel. The roads are completely frozen. There are a lot of accidents. Many people die. And so anyways, I felt that even if I die, I will still try to go. So I insisted that a car be arranged. So we had a car, and it was actually the best car, like an official car. And we were 4 people traveling in that car toward Gar Monastery. And on the way, sure enough, we had an accident, and the car basically flipped over and landed on its roof. So it was completely totaled. But I really wanted to go to the Yamantaka Drupchen. And so the reason why it is also so important is because when I was just released from prison, like turning 79 to 1980, so during the time of the Cultural Revolution, there was this the special tanka of Yamantaka had been hidden. And then when I was released from prison in the beginning of 1980, for the first time, this tanka, very old tanka, arrived back at the monastery. And so at that time, we used it as our support to practice. And so at that time, we didn't do the complete Yamantaka Drupchen actually in 1980, but we started with the rappelling practice actually, and using this tanka. And this particular tanka comes from that at the time of a previous Garchen Rinpoche, Changchu Wangbo, and this tanka was this lama's meditational support. And it actually is not brought out and kind of displayed all the time. It's only once a year, one time it is brought out, and that is during the 8 Ruka retreat. So it is a really extremely precious image, a tanka of Yamantaka, that I have also printed for the disciples to distribute. And so anyways, coming back to the car accident, so the car completely flipped over and it was totaled, and no one in the car, all the passengers actually remained completely unharmed. There was no injury, except I had a cut on my arm. So that actually then began to swell and become infected. And so anyways, meanwhile, with that infected arm, I arrived at the Yamantaka Drupchen at Gar Monastery. And so at the same time, there was a doctor from America together with another disciple, Amber, and they were in Xining at that time. And they heard about what happened and got concerned, and then they traveled all the way to the Yamantaka Drupchen, and then they even joined the Drupchen just so that they can treat me throughout the Drupchen. So that's why, again, I didn't die from the car accident. So this is how Tara protected me from the car accident. And so actually, also the car technician who later saw the car said that actually it's impossible for anyone to come out of that kind of accident alive. So it really was a miracle. The car was completely totaled. So this is how I feel that Tara had protected me also from that car accident. So I'm thinking about it again and again with great trust in Tara.
제도 가시 오 다시 퍼파도 시제 왜 그렇게 보여 정말 잡다지게 동네 잡다 직도 제일 얼마 문에잖아 막라 타면 찍바리 인자들이 보고 정들이 소소 가린 냠이제를 때 냠노구나 Tiri nyamni kache jenga tiri yina di tsoa la di rangi yun bo zhou na tiri di yina di tsoa jega yore tiri koso la Roma tamche rangi ka tsoa jega ma shiji jega chadza jega nyungwe ma re tiri soso la kari sa tsoa kakari yun bo kache di na tiri la di tiri rangi trini sembi jeya me ba tiri nganji pa tiri sewa tiri zhou shakwa tiri la sokwa tsoa namari jeya yore tiri tiri papa na tiri po chung chung tiri yang 빠라가 되는 게 박제도 발표하는 이제 요지 요래 그 대회를 다 발표하는 이제 그리고 밤에 주제 발표하는 이제 참아 찹치가 코로 암지가 찹다고 요면 내 체도도 자치 보이는데 남들이 직장 요 말이 그리고 로마도 주고서 냠설이야 들이 나와사제 쭉 가해 냠설인데 우리는 이거를 강하게 될 때도 고도처럼 그들이 라는데 이들 타르고 강에 잡혀요래 네 잡아제 잡아 직장을 말이 사람이 사지 초발이 민망 보게 로마 가시게 시작해도 오 라기 같이 로마 원양이 제도 초가지가 제마죠 이 세계의 양이잖아 특정 양이잖아 초가담으로 요도 아 같이 때릴 강에 마고 책도 라고 때 요래 이런 게 얘기 막 차오는 때 녀들이 로브들이 되다 라스나 tel들이 같이 담녀들 체르도들이 강에 체르도래 이 체도 셀들이 디지리데 초국으로 또 다이 송대로 송요래 이 파파데 이제다다 잡치한데 디지오래 이 다소소소네들이 파파 이제 상가래 이들이 디 아리조나 디 가만나 마숑 들이 탑제 로스안젤레스 로스안젤레스 다 다른들이 매 그자 도구요를 송고에 말들이 대위를 초래 들이 대위를 초래다 다 때마때들이 랑 게르게들이 시제 다 초도요 봐 그것도 삼지가 됐다 때 라데 저 치하게 이 지금 같이 보면 가구랑 것들이 나모니 좀들이 말합 제거는 것들이 주마 제발 좀 가지고 시제에 체세들이 도구요래 주마 제발 요래 제 조금 말이 보고 종종들이 라마지 종문에 더럽 제거래 이제 뭐 이제 시지 인파랑 저기요 말이 럼밀레 마소라 소에베 릅치 텐 땡초소들이 내 시지 인파가 고초제 이제 또 선거리 이렇게 시제 탑제 또 찹치와 돼 나바 데이터를 데이터는 진고요래 여기 체드 탑다지 저거 직자요 말이 이 체드 탑다지 봐도 조금 아디다 사자 제보다 때 강습도 때 탑다지 요래 이 탑주 공부하고 라서가 때마도 파파시지랑 이게 탑라고 요래
Also, regarding the Yamantaka and the Vajrakhilaya practices, the Drupchans, actually, I have actually never intentionally made an announcement or kind of tried to bring people to the Yamantaka or the Vajrakhilaya Drupchans. So maybe some have thought that because it's so important, I made it widely known that people should come to this practice, but actually not at all. I have actually never announced or really made like kind of publications about public announcements about the Yamantaka and the Vajrakhilaya practices. Actually, it all came together naturally. And so, generally speaking, all the deities are really the same, but the deity that one practices for a long time then often has greater blessings to oneself. So when I was very young, I also had to begin with this, engaging in this practice, and then having engaged in this practice for many years and gained experiences. This is the reason that when other people now also join those retreats, that a special feeling arises in them. So when something has been practiced for a long time, then this has the power to kind of transmit a special feeling also to others. So this is what I've practiced for a very long time. And disciples have reported all kinds of experiences during these retreats. But really, disciples have basically gathered just naturally. It just came all together naturally, and not because any announcements about it were ever made. So the special quality that comes from, for example, the Yamantaka Drupchen is that it has been practiced for a very long time. And when you practice a deity for a long time, and then the deity actually never leaves your mind. It's always there. And that then leads to all kinds of experiences when we practice it together. And then the same is also true for the Vajrakilaya practice. So actually, these were two practices that my father actually really regarded as very important to practice. So it was the Yamantaka practice, and it was the specific Vajrakilaya practice. And so, because this has been kind of in our tradition for so long, just naturally it became all pervasive. And because it is so precious, it must never be interrupted. But still, even though it is so precious, I never really spoke about it publicly. And so slowly disciples gathered and wanted to do the practice too. And actually, in general, it doesn't really matter what you practice, what Buddhist practice you do, but you certainly have to do some practice. It all depends on our own karmic connection. The Buddha taught according to the various dispositions of sentient beings. So it also depends what we have a past life connection to. And so because people felt this connection, they came from far away and they endured many hardships just in order to join this Yamantaka Drupchen, even though it wasn't really announced ever. And they just naturally felt the pull towards this retreat, towards this practice. Some disciples have said, for example, I've practiced another deity for so many years, but I never really had a special feeling arising. And then I practiced Yamantaka just one single time, and I have all kinds of experiences and feelings arising. And it's not the same for everyone. Some also experience it more as a difficulty, a hardship. And it also depends on one's karma. And then sometimes if one still has some negative karma and habitual imprints, those tendencies, then such a practice can become a way to make them surface quickly. And actually that's also the blessing of the deity. When all of these obstacles and difficulties and so on suddenly arise, that actually is a sign of the deity's blessings, and in particular the Yamantaka and the Vajrakilaya. So anyways, this is how these practices have spread. And so in Arizona then, for example, eventually people didn't fit in the Lama house, so we had to hold their retreat in the temple. And then slowly even more people were interested, so then we had to hold a second Yamantaka retreat, which was then held in Los Angeles. And so then that went on, and then again, many people ended up not getting a seat, and there was always too many people. So then the next Drupchen was started in Taiwan, and now in Taiwan, they have been able to really pull it together in a way that so many people can join this retreat. And so this is how it all came about. And so regarding the practice of this deity, it's also not just something that I personally do, but it is a very old Gar monastery tradition that has been uninterrupted for 8 generations. And so uninterruptedly for all this time, we always held the Yamantaka Drupchen according to the Jigong Kagyu lineage. And it was never interrupted. So it's important that it never becomes interrupted. And for me, it started when I was very young, and at that time I was made a lama, at the monastery and basically had to practice whatever the monastery practiced. So at that time, when I was a boy, it was more like I really had no choice but to practice Yamantaka. But in any case, then it really developed into deep practice. And then I had completed eventually the first 7 Yamantaka Drupchans, and it is said once you have completed 7 Yamantaka Drupchans, this actually is sufficient for the approach and accomplishment and practice of the deity. So this is what I wanted you to know how the Yamantaka and the Vajrakilaya Drupchans, the practices have spread, how it really became so popular. So it hasn't become popular because we made a lot of announcements. What I do make announcements of are practices, Jikunkagi practices like the 5-fold path of Mahamudra and then Mahamudra itself and so on. So and the Gongchik, for instance. So there are practices like that we announce, but Vajrakilaya and Yamantaka were actually never announced. It came all together naturally.
Ari lep sarajise yang lobachili ya tok te da topso ti tok te de te sa top che boy de yun se de emchek da te chu pokha de do de do la ko de ta no ba ka ta ma so no le ta te tamchi de gare ji de roba ka shi de do chu rume cho de chu ruma ke chu gare che ge yu chu da ma gare yo ri de da ma chi kyang me de je ti ruma na ke 찌와이들이란 건 망하지, 수명하지들이 소화까지 강의 가르치나 랍상 집들도 맞추기도 라시메 말이데 라삼체들이 탑들 라탑지 찌레들은데 시합들 라탑지 집들도 망도 요리 이 지난이 집들도 못 보고 충분히 알아게지 레디가 가르치 집들도 막 람스 찌기도 오 그는 콜로 못아디서 나 못아디서 하고 마서 제티 루마치 라코더 루마데 데송도 니 모다 찾고는 서로 통사지들이 말이 데이터들이 다 있지요 거래 이 진네들이 쪽 되는 토대 가리 집제 흘러와미 beteng니 요래 somno 땅도 저속에 니 다다 뭐서 동아가 바차 레드 나빠 미파 삼마 다지 토라 요래 다지가 토라 요나 호그 나르체도 바땅 다지니 요버트는 레서마 코롱고 요래 갑들이 제티도 마르 다이로마 지요마 다리 타서 갑들이 지리 타도 요래 너는 다지를 레바차 요래 제티도 마르디 조변이 지노바 또니요는 또세 열지 열마리 또사지가 미도 요래 또나고 대방거니 시합이 바탕적인 지행거리 냐미잖아 너는 레바차 타마 다가 토라 요래 너네 말이 다데 노는 정서 이거 참아가 이진형 타고는 제야 다음 때만 했더니 이나는 들이다가 다 파윈이는 다 간이다 그 뭐마치 와탑지 참아가 갈라 그래 오 콜라보레스 가르보첼라보레스 내 말인 거 소리는 인글리시로 마세로 보망보 요래 다 되게 이사래 대해서 로마로 소와 톱데 듣지면 통 이렇게해서 소와도 대사를 남들이 무바린 콜로나야 요리만 콜로저리 다다 참만들이 로마로 제적비에 소와다들이 만나는 통 이 파만지들이 셈자고 들이 보고자고요 자기 요리 이 로마히 봐 사야사 망나 사야사 때문에 강서도 이치게 고니들 로마히 봐 또 로마까지 봐 또나 이 비유는 소는 나쁜 하죠 보통 보도 변에 보통 저때 너도 변에 너남지서 도바 탑체 도바 적제서는 냐 코와다 냐디 사만 코와게 되어도 가리고 이제 뭐나 소와다는 jun거 요리 얘는 레전드 밤이면 톡토스티 레드 파스 장고 그러면 제 소와다가 소나 지지스 양 미용 그러면 갑들 마톱도 딱한 토벌이 됐어요 요만 너는 이치르티 이제 토크요레디 이제는 다 답제라 보고는 뭐 접지는 막 통지 우리 대체 말을 라고 말이 접지도 말 대체 소왔다면더니 가리사 가리나 될 거라더니 망보라야 요리지 따뜻 소요 말이 돌아 대답이 이치었어들이 가리자 대비 주소를 넣어 주더니 로마 고쳐서 바꿔서 그 백갑에 망보자를 되지 가리 뭐야 가리 오 집디로만 이시지 왔다 쳇다 이시지 쳇 찍고지.
And so after I had already arrived in America, I encountered the fear of poison one more time. At that time, it was a little worse, much more powerful, and it really lasted for a long time. And I had to do all kinds of invasive examinations with doctors and so on. And so, in any case, I was protected in the end. And so, disciples sometimes may ask that. So you always say Tara will protect you, but then, like, do you have any instruction as to how this is going to happen? Like, any instructions that we can practice? And actually, there's no instruction really, because Tara basically has great love for all, like a mother. She's the protector for any kind of difficulty. So really, if there's any instruction, it is just whenever there is a difficulty, think of Tara. And that's really the instruction. And so in brief, we can say that all the deities of skillful means are in essence generic, and all the deities of wisdom are in essence Tara. And these are practices, this is a practice, especially the one of Tara, that I have familiarized myself with since I was very, very young. So also, for example, when I had this car accident, I didn't think about anything at all when it happened. I didn't even realize that it happened when it happened. When it happened, all I really thought of was Tara, and I held on tightly to my prayer wheel. And actually, really only after I was out of the car, I realized what had actually happened. So this is the kind of trust we must have in the deity. So if you are able to remember the deity will protect. And how will the deity protect? How is the deity able to protect? It's because of karma, unfailing karma. And it's really true. Really think about it. So karma, all of our habitual imprints, all exist only within self-grasping. And so that is, for example, to think there's him and me, there's this dualistic grasping, and so you think that he is causing harm to me. So from that perspective of dualistic grasping, karma will ripen, things will happen. But then when they happen, in that moment, if you are able to think of Tara, then in that moment, there is no thought of a self and there is no thought of other. So there is no self in that moment. And that is why Tara can actually protect you in that moment and free you from that danger that you are encountering. So in brief, all karmas and habitual imprints exist only in self-grasping. If you think of Tara, there is no self. So there is no more duality between the one who is being harmed and the one who harms. There is just Tara. So those of you who possess some intelligence, you will understand that and will know how to put that into practice. So all karmas and imprints exist in self-grasping. Therefore, it is said, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So just that is one point that you really can put your full trust in. And so then also regarding Tara practice, sometimes in the past in my homeland in Tibet, people wanted to give birth, conceive a son. So they would always come and say, give blessings that we will conceive a son. And so the word was kind of going around that when people wanted to have a son, then they said, go tell Garchen Rinpoche, you will get a son. because the Garchen Rinpoche comes from the Marseille clan, and it's said that a lot of boys were born in that clan. So they think that probably that's why, if you ask him, there will be a son. But so what I really tell them when they come then is practice Tara and drink them or eat the blessing pills or think of Chinrezig. And in Tibet, at the monastery, we had also these kind of protection wheels of Tara that I would give them. And so basically I tell everyone, practice Tara, pray to Tara singular pointedly. And if parents want to have a child, then it's also important that the parents have a good heart, because if the parents have a good heart and think of Tara, then the child will also turn out good. And so in this way, actually many people conceived like a son and children and so on. But really where it comes from is one's trust in Tara. This is really what it comes down to. In a praise composed by Verochana says that she gives son to those who want a son. She gives wealth to those who want wealth, and so on. She gives everyone is wishing for. So whatever it is in samsara and nirvana, even in a samsaric sense, whatever one is wishing for, it will be accomplished if one supplicates to Tara. But then, of course, we also have to think about karma. It all comes down to karma too. And we have to purify our karma when karma ripens. So therefore, when conditions ripen, then at that moment, think of nothing and just bring to mind Tara. And there's no need to think about anything else. So the point here really is that you must trust. When you trust, and this is how it is accomplished. This is how her protection is accomplished. And so if you trust, then if you want a son, for example, then practice Tara with trust. In fact, there is no need to come and ask me or tell me anything or ask me for anything, because whatever is the thing that you need or want, it is all the same. Single-pointedly practice Tara, supplicate to Tara. So actually, there is so much to be said about that, but also we don't have too much time. But that's really the essence of it. And so this story of how Tara had protected me also was put together by the Taiwan Center with really hard work. And then also Guncho Soba, he created these images. And so what's the goal? Why are we doing that? The goal is, the intention behind is, this is all done so that people develop trust in Tara. So it's really only for that.
America left the Roma Sarik Mazi Padi, Dosa Basatori, Basatron, Roma Chana, Kambana, the Taka de Jori, Tidra Yidina, Nishoke, the Range, Mana, Range Gora, the Lapa Tok, the Suzuki, the Miniti, and what Semate, thing of Taka de Gala, the Bajago, the Bajago to the Tosa Basatron, Torrete, they thought it just the Kadilati Roma di Soate, Yori, the Tini, Tata Roma, Nami Chela, the Sad Roma, Dr. Bako Kasakala Yori, and Joan I Kana Yori, Popomonana Yori, Man Roma di Tebari, some Roma di Roma Chabdumanderi, Roma Chabduma, the Tama Bokata, Kachik, Rumihiba, Sayamamo, no doctor. Then I Chabduma, the Tama Boton, dinner, simply yam the Yori, Bayo Pada, Treyo Pada, Tani. Senam don't me issue at the Telas of water, just Dona, this don't send the Drevayori. Roma Yami, Tamchi, and it's all Caligore, Tabimadi, Dona T. and Toko, and Kipo Samuri. Yamtari Yashi, the Roma, Tabimadi, Choa Loma Tobin, the Lord Zone, this don't trees and 이제 라탐지 로마노 창대 요래 심지지들 창대로 사자 치문디는 창대 요래 진짜 사체 모래세 이 로마탐지 때 다시 델레이션이 이게 좀 추치 저 고갑 라서 이제 제와시기 연구 요리 뉴바지데 진짜 냠니지 이치치 라고 강에 가리서 로마로 쏘와서 카페를 당한 접속 마송도 대통 맞이 소리 맞이 상 맞이해 버서 cap 요리 로마가 대다리 그러나 다시 델레이션이
So after I had also arrived in America, so this image here of Tara in the rainbow sphere, this image I received first when I was visiting Boston. So I was staying in a disciple's home, and in my bedroom there was a tanka of that particular image of Tara. And so in the early morning, I felt that the Tara in this tanka reached out with her hand to touch my head. And I really actually felt that. And that was a real experience. So that was so special to me that I said, I really want to take a picture of this tanka. And the disciple then said that no need to take a picture, you can have the tanka. So then I received that image of Tara. And I still really have those kind of feelings from that particular Tara. It's really very special. And so then when you engage in the practice of Tara, first there is an outer aspect of Tara. And that is that Tara, there are many Tara emanations in the world, all over the place. And Tara also pervades the 5 elements, and she is within people, male and female. That's the outer Tara. And the inner Tara is one's faith, is one's trust. And the secret Tara are those 7 Taras, the 7 protectresses in this green prayer book. And so actually that in itself becomes a practice. So many people actually have just recited. You can just recite and accumulate these 7 supplications of Tara, and also recite the mantra. It's also in there. So some may have already recited millions of these. And this little booklet, the 7 verses of supplication to Tara for protection, is also actually a teaching on the nature of the mind. And also, so it reminds one of mindfulness and conscientiousness. For example, that verse that speaks about the mother of non-dual mind and so on. So the content of this prayer is connected to the nature of the mind. So it actually can become a practice all in itself. So you can just recite this green prayer book of the 7 verses of supplication, and actually it also is an introduction to the nature of the mind, the teaching in itself. So it was written down by Kempo, I don't know which one, and so in any case, now the deity that you practice, all the deities that you practice are complete within one. So if you just recite this one prayer, then it is like all the deities are complete within it. And it is pointing out to the nature of the mind, and it is also an instruction on Mahamudra. So it is really extremely precious. And I encourage you to read this little booklet as a practice. So with that, I say Dashi Delek to all the disciples, and I'm happy that I had the opportunity to have this Tara retreat here, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. And if you're listening, you also have to practice and cultivate trust, especially when you encounter difficulties. Remember Tara and supplicate to Tara with trust. So don't think about like something has to be accomplished in a short term and so on, and then if it's not accomplished, then there was no protection. And also don't think that once it's accomplished and you don't think about the deity. But the deity, actually, Tara, is there to protect you from now until you attain enlightenment. So I'm sending you many dashi delek.
O tare tere mama aya jana pune put kuru so. Albert Sangha Tenche. Albert Sangha long life.
Thank you so much, Garchen Rinpoche, for sharing so many incredible personal stories to help us cultivate that trust in Tara. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts and want to make this offering to you on behalf of the center and everyone who sent in offerings. Thank you to Khenpo Tenzin for his commentary, helping us understand the 21 praises more deeply. And thank you to Ina for translating for us and allowing us to understand all of these really profound teachings, important teachings. Thank you so much. So just a reminder, tomorrow we have the Parnasharvari practice at 3:30, another date with Tara, and then an announcement that this new teaching series by Khenpo Tenzin on the King of Aspiration prayers commentary, that will begin on September 22nd now. So it has been moved a week from Tuesday to start on the 22nd. So please be sure to join us for that. And then His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche will do the White Tara Puja and the Burning Away Afflictions for the Living on Sunday, September 20th. So we wish you all very well. Lots of Tara love. Be well, stay safe.